Welcome back to the Ken Matthews Report. My pleasure to have Pennsylvania attorney Tom Carroll and former prosecutor and Michigan attorney Stephanie Lambert on the show today. Why is this such an important show? Because millions and millions of people have seen and know that the 2020 election and the 2022 election riddled with fraud, stolen elections in multiple states. There are election integrity issues. We're 5 months away from what I'm calling the mother of all elections, and people around the country are still in jail and evidence is still being ignored. And these two individuals have been in the trenches fighting for, you really are fighting for the Republic. And I want to thank you for that, because every time you guys go into a case, you put your career on the line. You put your safety on the line. So welcome to the show, both of you.
Thank you, Ken, for having us on. And you hit it right on the nail on the head there. Every single time we put our name on one of these cases, there's retaliation after the attorneys. And I've been practicing almost 20 years. Tom, how long have you been practicing?
36 plus years.
And Tom's a former prosecutor as well.
I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that, Tom. I forgot you're also a former prosecutor.
Yes.
So we've never seen anything like this in our careers, where the attorneys are targeted for litigating on behalf of their clients that they have an ethical obligation to be an advocate for, and they've sworn an oath to the Constitution. So Tom and I, swore an oath to the Constitution, and we're zealous advocates for our clients. And I've just never seen anything like this in my career, and it's truly sad. Right now, Tom's going through a lot. I'm sure he wants to tell you about that. But I was, Sidney Powell's local counsel on the federal case she filed in Detroit, Michigan, way back in December of 2020. And at that point, I received my first bar grievance, and I was sanctioned by the court. The court tossed the case on procedure, never had a hearing on the merits. I was sanctioned hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I received my first bar grievance. It took time, but I won both of those. So unfortunately, the media, the mainstream sham media, didn't report that with the same passion and excitement that they reported the sanctions and the grievance, but I won. And what's really significant about that case, Sidney Powell had discovery, meaning we got access to the evidence, been granted by the lower court, and hearings on the merit had been held, we would have discovered what Frxxx had discovered in 2023 when it was reviewing the Detroit data, which was approximately 35,000 fraudulent ballots, and then all these precincts with more ballots than envelopes and more envelopes than ballots. I have a client named Yehuda Miller, and he was brilliant. He did a FOIA request for all of the documents out of Detroit for the 2020 election. And, they slow rolled it. It took him a long time to actually get access to the paper. But when he did, we hired a firm, Frxxx. And Frxxx has worked as Detroit's expert. And he has also worked at the state of Michigan. So I hired him so that they could not pierce his credibility and attack him. I hired their expert. And so their expert said approximately 35,000 fraudulent ballots. And that's not just from his firm. When he was doing the FOIA fulfillment, where he's looking at the ballots and the documents, these Detroit city workers were commenting, this seems like different paper. This seems like different font, and they were having conversations about this. So that's really significant. So we've been attacked and attacked and attacked. And now Tom is going through this bar grievance where he's had to answer this, lengthy complaint that Dominion and the Secretary of Pennsylvania were essentially the impetus of, as a result of a breach of contract case that Tom and I had filed on behalf of Fulton County, Pennsylvania, because the Dominion brand machines, Frxxx again, found that there was international communications that were not consented to coming into those machines, that they failed to comply with federal standards, CISA, DISA, NFIT, and a number of other issues. So this breach of contract case was filed, is open. We're still litigating it. And meanwhile, Tom got pulled into this, just horrendous grievance that he has to defend his bar license and fight for the ability to even represent clients moving forward. So it's just one little game after another that they pull that we have to defend while we're proactively pursuing these causes for our clients.
There's so many layers to this. The so-called lawfare, but then all these nuggets. Every time I talk to one of you guys, I get another nugget that, because I'm a pretty good researcher and I kind of know a lot of what's good. There's so many books and documentaries and papers that are out there that prove so much of what you're fighting for your clients. But this massive shutdown by the government and the media that keeps this away from the public, like what you just said about, for years, several people were saying, credible people, and now it's official, that these machines had communication from not only out of state, out of the building, but out of the country, and that the machines can be programmed, pre-programmed, and that they can be hacked online, and they can be stopped and reset. All these things are fact. And yet, in the case of Pennsylvania, I don't know if Michigan did it or not, they renewed the contract with the same exact machines. So I call 2024 Groundhog Year, because it's like 2020, there's a whole group of people in government that heard all these legitimate grievances, and rather than try to fix them, they've just been attacking the attorneys. I don't think the typical civilian understands the repercussions of the fact that when you go to question an election, you and your attorney become a target and the government doesn't respond. Is that accurate?
That's accurate. Sorry, Tom. we both agree it's accurate.
I mean, it's terrifying, actually, when you look at the scope of our republic, how it's deteriorating around the edges. Free speech and the Fourth Amendment, the Second, the First, the 10th, the 9th, the 5th, just pieces of it falling apart. And now we're 5 months away from the same games being replayed. I don't even know how you guys are going to deal with that.
Well, they started off by saying that the 2020 election was the fairest election in history of America. And we should not believe our lying eyes, so to speak. And we saw incidents going on in Michigan and Wisconsin and Philadelphia and Pennsylvania and other places. And as soon as the election was over, Pennsylvania had a unique situation where we had Act 77 passed unconstitutionally. And we started with that as the first foray into just challenging that situation where those unchecked ballots were just allowed into the system when that was not something that was constitutionally mandated. And that first challenge, of course, was rejected by the Supreme Court, but the Commonwealth Court actually declared on 2 occasions that law was unconstitutional. So that started people looking at everything, and then we know things were going on in Allegheny County, Delaware County, et cetera.
Oh, yeah.
And we started working on issues out of the Delaware County situation, which many of you have seen those videos that were released a couple of years ago showing the case. And I know Stephanie has a lot to say about that as well.
And Detroit is a shambles. I mean, there's been several books, and I forget the name of the books. I'm sure you've read them all and seen them. But there's been such a focus on Detroit, just like Georgia and just like Philadelphia. Those are just these key blue Democrat epicenters of corruption that trickles through the district attorney's office. The sheriff looked the other way. The people just look the other way. And then when you guys, Tom in particular, I mean, Tom can't find a decent judge, which is terrible.
I think, Ken, it's not always that people are looking the other way. When these machines were put in place 25 years ago, it was designed to remove transparency from the very people that needed it the most. And that would be the clerk, and that would be law enforcement. So when you have paper ballots and the clerk that we trust in our community gets elected by the community to count the ballots, right? Because their reputation is known and the community wants them to run the election. You can go back and look at the paper ballots. It's transparent and it's easy. When there's a, illegal allegation, law enforcement can look and understand. When the machines became these black boxes that no one understood how they functioned and what they were capable of, this removed any ability for law enforcement to investigate and the clerk to even spot an issue in the first place. And the best example I have of that is Williamson, Tennessee. In 2021, the clerk was suspicious that her ballot count that came out from the tabulator, the tally, did not reflect what she saw going into the machine. I don't know all of those details, but for whatever reason, she felt like she needed to do a hand count. So she did, and it did not match the machine count. These were Dominion brand machines. Okay, and so she did a second hand count, and her hand count matched her hand count. Her machine count matched her machine count over and over again, but the two did not match or reconcile. So she called the Secretary of State. The Secretary of State couldn't figure it out. They called the EAC, the Election Assistance Commission, which is the federal arm of elections. The EAC could not figure it out. Dominion voluntarily disclosed that it was its erroneous source code that caused the incorrect tally. So that's 100% possible. So unless we, and I don't want to hear about these risk limiting audits, those are a joke. Unless we do full audits and full recounts of the paper ballots, the machines disguise and there's no transparency. And if you look at Ben Cotton did a report by affidavit in Michigan, and in that he said that there's the ability to see who's voting live if you're able to access it remotely, swap out the file, and it will go undetected. That's alarming, right? He's explaining exactly how that can happen remotely.
Right.
And there's really nothing that's happened to prevent this from happening in 2024. It's a huge vulnerability. It's a huge risk. And we have to have a system that we can confidently know that the votes are counted accurately to reflect the will of the people.
It's amazing. The language, I call it the word salad, this game of, and some of the smartest people, I thought, over the years, I've watched this delusion we mentioned before, and we won't talk about it now, but we mentioned before COVID. The delusion that surrounds COVID is the same delusion that surrounds election fraud. And that's, people say they all do the same talking points, and the talking points are fakery. And that is, well, we had an audit. Did you have a full forensic audit from start to finish count? No, not one state has had a full forensic audit that matched voter logs, ballots, name, signature, and tabulation. They always separate them. It's like that example, someone used it in a book, I forget who it was, and they said it's like if you have a bunch of counterfeit money and you just recount counterfeit money. And you say, well, I just recounted it. It's fine. But it's not fine. It's counterfeit. But the count matches, but it's not real. There was the fact that no one cared enough to push this forensic thing is what worries me. And the fact that you're in a state, many of us are in a state where we're just going to repeat 2020, and the media has been front loading the fact that we are somehow conspiracy theorists. And well, those MAGA people, those election deniers. And that's what worries me, that where do we go? Where do we look other than courageous attorneys and the volunteers that are helping you? Where do we go as the population in 5 months when the numbers don't add up again?
Well, Ken, you have a great point. Tom and I will not be silenced. Okay. They've attacked, and there's a number of things I want to address here. One, you're talking about the full audit. Everything has to reconcile. So when it's not paper ballots that we're counting, we now have like 2,700 steps to an election, exaggerating just a tiny bit, but they all have to reconcile. So if you look at the state of Michigan, if you do by FOIA request, Freedom of Information Act request, or in Pennsylvania, they call it a right to know request. In Michigan, I have clients that have asked the Secretary of State by FOIA, who voted in the November 3rd, 2020 election, right? This should be simple. How many people voted? Who voted? Her answer changes every single time they fulfill this FOIA request. So from November 3rd to present, if you ask by FOIA who voted in the November 3rd, 2020 election, you're not getting the same answer. And that makes zero sense, right? They should just be replicating the same response that they gave previously, but it's changing. And so then it was looked at, why is this changing? That's bizarre. And so I don't know if you heard, but one of my clients, Stephanie Scott, who's the former Adams Township clerk, is my client. And we just got criminally charged in Hillsdale County in Michigan. And this is just absurd. It's insane. We know the law. We know we haven't violated any laws, and that will ultimately shake out in court. We have to go through a process now, but this is, again, one more step to try and silence me, and silence clerks for that matter, right? How dare Stephanie Scott ask questions on behalf of her community? And her questions were really important.
Well, she was heroic in what she did. That is the definition of, when you talk about patriotism and citizen heroics, it's people like what she did and other clerks around the country that risk their job, their reputation, being ridiculed, being targeted to say, I think 2 + 2 = 4, and you say it equals 7. What's going on here? And they took their future in their own hands trying to get to the truth.
Well, this is really significant. Stephanie Scott started asking the Secretary of State questions about the qualified voter roll, which is the state database of the voter roll.
In Michigan.
In Michigan. Now, the local clerks, the municipal clerks, could be sued if they don't maintain an accurate voter roll. They are literally, under the statute, the ones that are responsible for this. So she has to make sure her data reconciles. So she got elected in November of 2020. And she started learning that she's worked at engineering firms. She's a data person, very educated, smart woman. Okay. And wanted to learn every aspect of the election process to make sure that she did it appropriately. So she's looking at the qualified voter roll, asking questions about the machines, what they can do, what they can't do. And in learning the process, as soon as she started doing that, just a little too much, she raised a red flag to them. And so then she became a target. She was locked out of the qualified voter roll. She was ordered to delete data in violation of federal law. So she asked me, her attorney, can I delete this data? I said, no, you're going to violate a federal law. You could be charged by the feds at some point. And just because it's Biden's DOJ right now doesn't mean it will be tomorrow. You could be charged federally. You can't delete data. This is a USB drive. It costs $5. You can get a new one for the next election. You do not need to delete that. Store it under lock and key. That data, when it was analyzed, matched what her township had reported as voting, as it should. It matched what the county had reported as voting, as it should. It differed from the state data obtained by FOIA by 11.5%. Now, if you were to extrapolate 11.5% to the entire state of Michigan, that would be 800,000. Okay. Stephanie was highly suspicious because they received as clerks a notification in September and October of 2020 from the Secretary of State that the Elecxxxx system was going to inflate the Michigan voter roll by 700,000, and it would be done through the driver database at the state level, and that the local clerks would not see a paper trail of this. So again, that's triggering for these local clerks. We can't reconcile this. We are responsible for making sure that it's accurate. We're responsible to make sure that there's no fraud injected into our local system. But at the same time, the state is hiding this data. So that's really key for 2024, because what else would they be able to hide? They would be able to hide the illegal aliens that are given driver's licenses that are now on the voter roll. So she said there's a wall that has not been proven that exists that would prevent this illegal alien from being placed on the voter roll. But we know that doesn't exist because we have affidavits. And one of these affidavits said, listen, I didn't ask to be put on the voter roll. I discovered that I'm on the voter roll. He's from Ireland. And I've asked to be removed, and I'm still not removed. So how many times has this happened, right? And there's a lot of evidence that some of my clients have been investigating and looking at for a while as it relates to this very issue that'll soon be released.
And it's interesting, you were talking about data disappearing. Georgia's such a great example of that. There were several stages of the disappearance of the Georgia data when they were trying to reconcile things. They would try to do a full forensic audit, and then we're like, Well, we can to give you that, but we can't give you that and that. We can give you the people that moved, but we can't give you the people that signed up. That it was so touch and go. And then after the FBI left, the local people like yourself that were fighting to get to the truth, they said the FBI claimed that they had to take the evidence with them. So it's like the FBI showed up to a crime scene and took a bunch of ballots and stuff out of the state. It's
Right.
just it's happening all over. And my question is to both of you. And I've got so many questions, so we're definitely going to have you guys come back over and over, and so we can
I'd
continue
be happy to.
pick your brains. Because so many people don't know the quote, the truth and the minutia behind it, the minutia of all the games that they play when, like, our governor in Pennsylvania says, oh, we did audits, there was no fraud. I remember when the lieutenant governor, who's now the sweatshirt guy, hoodie guy, Fetterman, Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman, Senator. I remember, and I was working at WHP in the capital of Pennsylvania, and I was one of the handful of people, and Tom will tell you this. I was one of it. Tom would always say, man, you're going to get whacked, because I was one of the few people that would say this is a stolen election, and, you know, Tom Wolf is lying. I would say this on my talk show. And then in the news, you'd hear an interview with, like, John Fetterman. Look, anybody, and this is the quote that really, I knew we were losing our republic, especially here in Pennsylvania, when he said, look, I don't even think people should be allowed to question the election on social media. And if you're going on saying, hey, this number's wrong, well, then you're undermining democracy. And I think you should be taken off that platform. And I could not believe my ears as a radio host listening to a lieutenant governor say, you have no right to question the count of this election. And if you continue to do so, there's going to be a problem. And there has been.
It's insane. It's
Yeah.
insane. And Tom knows more about Pennsylvania than I do, but
yeah, with regard to the games that they play in Pennsylvania, that goes back to 2019 when Tom Wolf signed an executive order, not a law, not passed by the legislature, that required all the counties to buy all those new machines. And then they were only limited to a list of about 3 vendors, I believe it was, maybe 4, that they had to buy these machines from. And interestingly enough, they said, oh, nothing's wrong with them. And the 2020 election was clean. Well, we've been talking about all that, but it continues. In 2023, in Northampton County, ES&S machines were used in that election. They had already been under a consent decree because of the 2019 election debacle that occurred in Northampton County, where literally hundreds of ballots were flipping out of the machines and all sorts of things were going wrong with that 2019 election. And they promised that they would do certain things. They did not comply with that consent decree. And then in the 23 election, votes were flipping all day long on the retention vote for the Superior Court judges. And they never gave any explanation other than, lying to the public. I had obtained a couple hundred affidavits of voters that said that they witnessed this, and they renewed the contract to use ES&S machines again in spite of the violations.
And I started researching when all this exploded in Pennsylvania, and there was the truck and the guy from the post office that was talking about the pallet of ballots, and then they put the muscle on him because he was talking about a bunch of ballots that were dated late, and he was ordered by his supervisor to put them in the count area for the election anyway. And he had an issue. He had an issue with that. And then here's a fun thing. If you guys are looking for something to do over your next holiday weekend, here's a fun thing. Look up how many people worked for those 3 voter tabulation companies that worked with and for politicians in the particular state. Like, there's situations where the former chief of staff of a senator works for the company, or 2 years prior, the person that's now working with a judge used to work for that company. If people saw this like on a wall with all the things connected, I think it would blow people's minds. It's just getting them that information.
Interesting. Well, I'd love to look at that, Ken. We've looked at personnel in a number of these cases, and we're keeping track of a lot of that data, obviously. But it's just like one puzzle piece after another. It's taken several years to put it together. And I think I've told you, but I don't think I've told you on your show how one of the most significant pieces that I received in December of 2020 was an affidavit that reflected in Berry County, Michigan, that the Independent was beating Biden and Trump with almost 50% reporting. And so someone took a screenshot of that and said, this doesn't make sense. This never happens. The Independent doesn't beat the two main candidates, especially with 50% reporting. And it had a number associated with it for the Independent, which I think was 12,500. Well, the Independent De La Fuente ended up in that jurisdiction with 12 votes or 15 votes, a handful of votes. So we know that they lost votes. And I had a number of other pieces of evidence turned into me in my firm on cases and so many different cases and silos. But it reflected the same evidence, right? That the votes were shifting and flipping through the Independent, and that people were losing votes. And that happened with the U.S. Taxpayer Party in Michigan against John James and Gary Peters for U.S. Senate. So that is something really significant that we've looked at. And then there's expert reports that have explained exactly how that happens. So there's just layer after layer that we've had to peel away here to sort of figure out what happens, how does it happen, who's responsible. And Tom and I are going to continue to work. They can't silence us. It's just we have to deal with all of these attacks while we're doing this work.
Now, who in government, and go ahead, you can address this first, Tom. Who in government should we feel good about? Because we watch people like yourself getting pounded, and those of us that have embraced free speech and are trying to get the truth out, whether we're podcasters or citizen journalists or whatever, we're getting pounded. And we look toward, I always had this feeling, and you could correct me because if I'm offbeater on this or not, but because you're a former prosecutor. When I was raised, I always grew up thinking, well, if the local police screw up, you can always go to the state police. And then if the state police, if they're up to no good, we can always call the FBI. And if the FBI is up to no good, you can call the DOJ. And we're out of people to call now, it looks like. This is what bothers me as an American citizen. I mean, where do you two go to find support from our government, or is it just going to be David and Goliath?
Well, this is not hopeless. There are a number of investigations taking place.
Good.
And I don't have the liberty to give you all of those at this moment.
I just want to know they're happening.
They're happening. And then we're turning every negative into a positive. So every single time they pursue me, it allows me to reveal more evidence. Right.
Excellent.
Now you're giving me the standing you told all my clients they didn't have. Right. And it's not moot. Let's talk about it now. So every single time they attack, it's going to expose more and more evidence. So we're not discouraged. It's just a process to go through.
Tom?
Yeah, I think when you talk about the weaponization of this government and the lawfare, this has bigger implications than just the election cases. Although it's bad enough with how our elections are so vital to our free republic, but it also goes to anybody who would represent any person that might be raising a case against the narrative of the current regime. For instance, you might want to be representing Houck, who was the one who ran for Congress out of the 1st Congressional District that the feds arrested because he was simply protecting his son down in Philadelphia. And he said he would turn himself in, and they busted his door down at like 4 in the morning. And then they talked about that in the Police State movie that Janessa Souza put together there about the weaponization. But now imagine this, he needs a lawyer. He tries to find a lawyer that will represent him against this narrative, and it's a Second Amendment, it's a pro-life issue or a Second Amendment issue. Now, knowing what they do to the lawyers that represent people in these causes, who's going to step up and do this? The smaller and smaller number of lawyers. There are some very good, effective lawyers who are willing to fight, but their intention is to make sure that they don't really do that, because they make it there's so many threats to our license and our way of life.
Mhm.
David Brock, who started that Project 65, I mean, he's specifically put $25 million to go after lawyers who would file these kind of cases, and make public statements that they not only intend to seek their disbarment, but to destroy their lives and their ability to survive, etc. So this is concerning for our free, our way of life and our rule of law, that it's not just elections that they're going after. They're going after anything that supports the narrative of this current administration.
And in addition to that, and you guys would know this, do you not have to have from legal training or certification or whatever? Don't you have to have a certain level if you're in a federal court versus a state court versus a regional? Isn't there some level of jurisdiction where if I don't know how it would work with you, Stephanie or Tom, but I'm just saying, if a lawyer just said, look, I want to go to Washington to represent my client there, he's being bullied by this voting committee or whatever, can't the Fed say, well, you can't practice in this court?
Well, that's a great question. And the answer is yes, you do. Tom, I know why Tom's laughing, right? Because this resulted in me ending up in leg irons. Yeah, so you have to be admitted to the court. And I don't think that's funny, by the way. I have to joke about this.
Well, no, I love your senses of humor, because you prove once again that we are on the side of the good guy and we're on the side of right, because you can laugh at yourself, you can laugh about this, and you could get up and go through it. I noticed that people that if they have something to hide or whatever, they're just so like, there's no room to move. And I think we know what's happening here. We just have to figure out how to, overcome it. But you've just, everything you've said so far has been positive, which is outstanding. And if I didn't laugh, and Tom and I talk about this all the time, I've run into him a few times out in public when, he was running from the police. I'm just kidding. He's never fled the police. Because they put a chip in his head. So yes. He has no place to run anyway.
I'm not hearing you, Ken.
I lost you as well, Ken.
How about now?
Yes. Better.
Okay. Yeah. So that's just my backup microphone. If the majority of patriots didn't have a sense of humor, I don't know how we get through this, because it is so discouraging. I remember when the first time someone held a payment from me based on violating community standards. Now, I've been in broadcasting for 43 years. I've never violated a community standard. There's been no lawsuits, no FCC violations, nothing. The only thing I violate is what you guys do. You guys violate the narrative. I violate the narrative. And anybody who violates the narrative, every good teacher, every decent cop, every good lawyer, they're getting heat for it. And if you don't have a sense of humor, your head's going to explode.
You're exactly right. So I had to get admitted to the Washington, D.C. federal court. I'm admitted in Michigan to the federal court and several other federal courts. But in order to represent some of my clients, I had to be admitted in DC. So I did just that. I got admitted. And shortly thereafter, I became Dominion's worst nightmare, because I represent Patrick Byrne in the Dominion defamation suit.
Wow.
Right. So,
oh, gosh.
So Dominion sued Fox News, OAN, right? OAN, no longer, unfortunately, reporting, right? This was designed to silence the media and anyone with a following, right?
And it worked.
It worked. That was a Fox News sham settlement. And so I came in on the case. I knew what I was looking at. I understood the material and the substance. I had already been Fulton County's attorney, where we've sued for breach of contract against Dominion. I know what I'm looking at. I went down to DC and I end up in leg irons, because in the Michigan case, there was a matter where.
Oh, you were serious?
Oh, I'm not kidding.
About the leg irons?
No, I'm totally serious.
Oh, I thought you were joking. You were actually cuffed up.
Yes. Oh, I was taken into custody. I thought you heard this story, Ken. Yeah, I got a tour of 4 different holding cells within 24 hours. So I was taken into custody because in Michigan, I have the first target, not the first, the sanctions and the grievance were first, but Dana Nessel charged her opposing counsel, Matt DePerno and I, on the Antrim case.
Yes.
With Dare Rendon, right? We had that battle going on.
Antrim County, yep.
There was a bizarre situation that took place where I was disputing something by motion. My previous attorney had a cyber attack on his office, much like Fulton County has had a cyber attack. Delaware County has had a cyber attack. Well, he had a cyber attack on his office while he was representing me, lost access to a lot of his emails, data.
Oh my gosh.
Right. But he had a paper backup. So shortly thereafter, a month or two later, there is an explosion in Macomb, Michigan, if you want to look it up.
I remember that.
Yeah. Well, so that happened to be right next to where he stores his paper files.
Oh,
so, I mean, we're just dealing with layers of coincidences here.
Yes.
His staff would bring the paper backups to this one location on that site. And so he was going and had written me an email that he wanted to see the site, see the status of his files. He believed that they were okay. There was a hole in the ceiling and water coming in, but he wanted to check it out. Nonetheless, I thought we weren't going to court that afternoon. And I found out later that he had gone to court. Huge mix up. I had appealed the matter to the appellate court at that point, and I went down to DC to represent Patrick on his matter. And in the meantime, the Attorney General had communicated with, I believe, Dominion, and I was taken into custody in DC for allegedly failing to appear in Michigan. I'm giving you like the Cliff Note version. There's a lot of details, right? And so anyway, what was represented down in DC was false. I had to deal with it when I got back to Michigan, but it was designed to
scare
literally,
you.
well, and to silence me. Literally, I was in a jail cell.
Okay.
Right. One of the jails that I was held in, and I was becoming nervous because they did not book me until that morning. So I had been moved 3 times and I was deprived a phone call. And at one point, so at my family, I have 3 children. They're expecting me at home. I wasn't able to call anyone. And I finally was able to get an officer to explain that to me. And she's like, well, everyone gets a phone call. And I'm like, well, I have been told I cannot make a phone call. And she came back and she said, you've been classified as too dangerous to make a phone call for whatever you might have to say on the phone. And I'm like, this is insane. So I was getting nervous that I was going to get some Jeffrey Epstein treatment because by that morning I had not yet been booked. But then we went to court and I had an attorney present. And obviously I was allowed to leave to go back to Michigan. But what's really key is the Department of Justice objected to that. They wanted me to take the van that could maybe stop in like Colorado and California and pick up people along the way. And like 3 weeks later, maybe I would be back in Michigan. So this is designed to like punish, torture, slow me down, silence me, literally make me unable to represent my clients. And it's just not working. Right?
My God. Now, how many major or larger, because this is like I said, this is a small growing truth pursuing podcast. But I mean, as I hear this, all I can think of is, where's 60 Minutes? Where's 2020? Where's Dateline? Where are the giant platforms to point out the fact that lawyers are getting, and I think about all the illegal foreign nationals, different topic, but as you're being locked up and kept from, communicating and then there's just thousands of illegal foreign nationals pouring in every day to this country. We've really, I don't know.
And be given driver's licenses and
yes.
likely ending up on the voter roll.
Yes.
But you're right. And so if you look at the timing, this will be covered by 60 Minutes one day. Eventually, the true narrative, right, which is not a narrative, will be clear and it'll be popular to cover, right? This is unpopular. We were all told that this is unpopular, don't touch it. They made it political, which it wasn't ever, to make people want to, stop talking about it and arguing with their neighbor and shut the topic down. But what had happened just prior to the Dominion hearing was that I had provided the file to law enforcement. So the Dominion discovery documents I was given as part of the case directly from Dominion for the discovery for Patrick's case, and I turned them into law enforcement. And so I can't talk about the contents because the court has now said that that's under the protective order.
Understood.
But procedurally, what took place, I gave the documents to law enforcement. And so their Dominion was, raising that issue with the court and complaining and asking that I be removed as Patrick's attorney.
Wow.
So they're very transparent in what they're trying to do. And then subsequently to that, Stephanie Scott, my Adams Township clerk, had announced that she was running for county clerk. I had filed a brief that was 600 pages, including exhibits, for a different client wanting by FOIA the EPB data that shows who voted on the thumb drive that goes into the poll book. We were in the middle of fighting that. I had just filed a brief on that case showing why he was right and should have access to that data and is entitled to that data, and a number of other coincidences. And so then we get criminally charged in Hillsdale. So part of the bond that was requested and denied by the judge was that I be ordered that I cannot practice on any election case.
Oh my God.
So they were literally transparent about what they were hoping to accomplish.
And when you say transparent, for people just tuning in or listening to this, in other words, they're just blatantly breaking the law and violating your rights. They don't even care if anybody sees it. They're not being transparent in a good way. Like, honestly, they're just, they're scumbags, and they're saying, hey, we're scumbags. We're coming to get you.
Right. Well, the judge did not give that to them. Right. So denied it. Right. But they were clear. So I knew what they were trying to accomplish, but they actually said it. That was just shocking. So it's been just surreal, and Tom feels the same way. Right. We've just been getting grief from the start, and we're not trying to whine or complain.
Oh, we understand.
It's been a lot to handle on top of it, which is by design our work. So we're juggling it, and I think we're juggling quite well, Tom.
The Pennsylvania Supreme Court, actually, in its opinion from last year relating to that litigation out of Fulton County, actually made, I think it was Justice Dougherty, made a statement that he wanted to make sure that he sent a message to any other lawyer that would think about handling matters in this way.
I remember reading that and reading it on the air. And again, the frustration I have, and I can't even imagine the frustration you have, having law degrees and being law abiding and fighting for, I can't imagine that frustration. But to see that judge make a comment like that, basically saying, and he wrote it, if other attorneys and citizens, if you choose to handle your questioning of the election this way, there's going to be a problem. That sounds like the mob.
Well, people need transparency. We have to go back to paper ballots. People need to have transparency. It has to be quick. It has to be prior to the certification of the election, because courts rule that it's moot if you file it after the certification, but you can't see anything before the certification. In Michigan, I have a battle going on for a different client right now where they want to do all recounts by machine. So we're disputing that that's even a recount.
My God.
No, it's awful, right? It's just like it's one thing after another that we're fighting. And it's surreal when I'm sitting in a courtroom arguing one of my cases, right, where they're coming after me.
Yes.
On the one hand, I'm happy to be able to actually provide the evidence and truth and transparency to the public, right, which is what I will do through my cases.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very clear that they want to put me away. Right. They want to silence me that way as an attorney. I have a family. I have 3 children. I'm a mommy.
I was going to ask you about, and I want to ask both of you about that. Are your family members, especially the adult voting age, politically thinking family members, are they still supporting you on this, or is their support waning? Like, just give it up, Stephanie. Tom, forget it. It's never going to, you know what I mean? Or are they realizing this is really a fight to save our republic?
You know, Tom, I don't know about you, but I have full support from everyone, family, friends, neighbors. I have neighbors that I'll, be walking the dog and the kids, and they'll say, "Hey, we just want you to know we follow you on
Oh, that's
social
the
media,
best.
and you're amazing, and thank you for what you're doing." And some of them are Democrats, right? They understand it's not political. This has been a mistake targeting all of us. So when you have to cover up a crime as a prosecutor, it's easiest to catch people in the cover up, right?
Yes.
And right, so now they're in cover up of 2020, and Tom and I have whistleblowers. We have it on video, we have audio, we have all sorts of evidence across the country, right?
Awesome.
We know what happened, but why are they going to these links? Because they have to do the cover up, right?
Right.
Otherwise, the actual criminals get exposed. So that's what we've been experiencing is people are now seeing through it all, right? And so they've actually helped us by targeting us.
I heard that argument before on the periphery before you guys got this far along. I had heard that, and that they say the same thing about Trump at some level. Like I think the Bragg case made him an icon. Whether you agree with Trump or not, the whole 34 convictions and the ridiculousness that took place with that. I mean, he's a folk hero in new communities now. There's communities that rediscovered Donald Trump just because everybody can tell these people are just railroading this guy. They're just railroading Stephanie. They're railroading Tom. They're railroading these whistleblowers. I think about the whistleblowers. Wasn't Michigan one of the original states? And I remember, I'm thinking the accent now. I remember that one woman that worked for Dominion, or she was doing something with the computers. She was one of the first people to go viral and just call it like she saw it. I don't know if.
Well, there was, I think her name was Monica Palmer. She was the canvasser that did not want to certify because the
Yes.
data didn't match.
And they
the
just
data,
attacked her.
right, they attacked her. And it like, I think she said at the time it was off like in a precinct by 30 or 34. I vaguely remember from seeing this on TV myself. And if she had paused and refused until the data reconciled to certify, possibly we could have then learned what Spokane had in 2023. I don't know how much data would have been looked at, whether it was just what she was responsible for reconciling, but Spokane, remember, found 35,000 fraudulent ballots in Detroit.
Yes.
So that could have been discovered timely. So the canvas process is really important, but if we're not going to hand count ballots to reconcile them and we're just going to use the machine again, we learned from Williamston, Tennessee, that I spoke about earlier, that doesn't work. The machine count never matched the hand count. The Secretary of State couldn't figure it out, and the EAC couldn't figure it out. So why would that possibly be the solution?
Yep.
And to answer to your question, for such a time as this is, I think there's a reason why we're doing this. And I think, that Jesus told us, be not afraid. And so what I'm getting is a lot of support from my faithful friends who offering insight and prayer as to the fact that they realize, and the more that they learn about this story, that we are on to the truth, and that they're proud of us for standing up and praying for us because it is the right thing to have done. And I really haven't heard anybody, except for maybe a couple Republican politicians, look me in the eye and say, why don't you just move on? Because everyone, and even some of them, I was surprised when I actually was given an audience to explain to some of these local people exactly what we have. Then they changed their tune. I said, because you know what? We're not talking about overturning an election. We're not looking just backward. We're looking backward so we can look forward. And you can't if you don't do that, then we're never going to fix anything, and we're never going to win any election ever again. And most of them see that. And
That's good.
I don't see other than the loony left and the threats that they send to both of us, I don't see anybody who's not understanding, even people that weren't politically involved, once they hear the story, to say, oh my gosh, we need to fix this.
So is your team growing? Are you finding other attorneys in your own states and other states that are realizing, wow, you're right, we need to get engaged in this? Or are you still going to, you're still battling for funds and support, you know, outside of the public, which again, the power of prayer is amazing. And I can understand how people would be rooting for you. I mean, since I met Tom and the more I learned about what he was doing, I was like, I don't know if I could do that. I don't know if I could do what he does. I don't know if I could be pounded on like that, you know?
Well, Ken, our legal team is amazing. And Tom and I get through it because we both see this the same way. Every single time we have something we need to respond to or deal with, whether it be an attack on our clients or an attack on us as the attorneys, we just look at it unlike the judge in the New York Trump case, right? Where he treated Trump special, right? Where suddenly we just threw the Constitution out, every rule, procedure, and it was this, circus show that he put on that violated and really exposed what they were doing to, Donald Trump.
Mhm.
Tom and I have analyzed how would we handle this for any client? How would we handle this like every other case? What is the ethical thing to do? What's the right thing to do? What's the constitutional thing to do? And we just proceed forward, whether it's popular or unpopular. And we just, every step of the way, just to handle it with that in mind.
Mhm. What I want to do is, because I know your time is very valuable, I definitely want you guys to come back on. And when you come back on, give us the specifics you can legally give us, because I know you're both in cases and you have to be very careful. I would imagine everywhere you go, someone's looking for you to do something, like accidentally write something on a napkin and leave it there by accident, and then you're going to jail again. You know what I mean? So,
Well, it's been grueling, but we're doing well. Yeah, we would love to come back on with updates, Ken.
and before you go, Tom, what's your biggest victory so far? Just to give people that are new to that, there's going to be a whole bunch of people responding to this. They're going to be new. They had no idea the battles you guys are fighting and what's happening. And I think it's good news. So what's the biggest victory you've had so far, Tom?
I think the biggest victory is the bigger picture. Look at the picture that when they go after us so hard that we know we are over the target, and that more and more people are seeing that, to come to the conclusion that something has to be done. And there's all these groups across the states that Stephanie has worked with and other people have worked with across the country that are election integrity groups that are just building up their momentum to do what they can do at various aspects. I think that some people have made a comment that it was death by 1,000 cuts in terms of why this election went the way it did. And there's a lot of issues to fix, and there's a lot of different groups standing up and providing. And then when they see things, they know that people like Stephanie Lambert is an attorney who's handled these cases. And when they think they might have a case, they go to her. We're not looking to find cases. They come to us because they hear what we've done. And that, I think, is the biggest victory. What
about you, Stephanie?
Ken, I think we're just going to keep moving forward. We're happy to give you updates on all these cases, but I am so hopeful. I really see light at the end of the tunnel, and I can say that knowing what's in all of my files and the status of each case, right? I feel bad for others that don't have that information. And that's why, I hear all of the time, well, what can be done? No one's doing anything. I completely disagree with that. I really, really think that we have a quick resolution to what's been happening here. It's all getting exposed.
Excellent.
So,
oh my gosh,
yeah.
This has made my whole week, because you guys are in it. You're in it up to your neck, and you see what a lot of us don't see. My goal would be, as the broadcaster, as the journalist, is I want to get more of this out so people realize it's not hopeless and we were right. It was stolen. And
well, we have a number of cases and hearings and trials coming up. Tina Peters goes to trial in the beginning of August. Stephanie Scott and I have a hearing coming up if it goes. The judge stopped the hearing last week. We were supposed to call witnesses, and my attorney presented law that had not been provided to the court by the Attorney General. And she said, we're stopping. I can't hold the hearing. I need to look at the law. So that's all we can ask for, is that the law is actually looked at. And once that happens, we know we've prevailed. So, this will all work out in time. So we have case after case that we're going to be in court on, or other attorneys will be in court on, and it's going really, really well. Georgia, that case that Donald Trump is charged on, along with a number of people, right? That case, I think they have until March of 2025 to rule at the appellate level. So that won't go to trial anytime soon, but that if it does, a lot of evidence will come in. That they opened up with the way that they charged that case into entering all 2020 evidence in.
Oh, nice.
Right. I mean,
yeah.
So Fannie, I'll withhold my thoughts. But anyway, that was a gift. So
well, what I will do, though, I'm going to make sure I send you some great Fannie memes.
Oh, I would love that.
Because we have Tom will tell you, I just sent him some today. We have a lot of fun on this show. And that's how we stay sane. One of my slogans is have fun getting to the truth, because if you don't, you're gonna go crazy. But thank you so much, both of you, for being on the show, and God bless you for everything you're doing. I have to say, you put me in such a good mood, and lawyers rarely do that, because I don't like lawyers.
I don't like lawyers either.
I don't like most lawyers. I'm like, I have 2 lawyers on the show. I feel like it's Friday.
We don't blame you, but
no, you guys are the good guys.
That's right. Well, thank you so much, Ken. We would love to come back on.
Okay, we'll see you next time then.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.